Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Geoff.
I'm Mike,
And I'm Derrick,
and you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury.
which is now sponsored by Morwa P LLC.
Well, today we're discussing The Nice Guys, a 2016 film starring Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe and Kim Basinger and a few other people.
Such a great overview, starring three people and a few other people.
Yeah, it is a buddy film noir, neo-noir from Warner Brothers that is set in 1977 Los Angeles. They are investigating the disappearance of Ryan Gosling's character is investigating the disappearance of a woman, an adult film actress who was essentially wrapped up in a conspiracy around car companies and the Justice Department. Hijinks ensue.
I like that. Hijinks ensue. That's like the Seinfeld yada yada yada.
Right.
Amelia's dead.
Hijinks ensue, and
Amelia's dead.
and several people are dead at the end. And there's some porn thrown in there too, but we'll get to that.
That's the best overview we've had so far of any movie.
Yeah, and we're putting it at the end, so everyone has to listen through the whole thing. So I picked this movie because as I was watching it for, I don't know, the umpteenth time, it's a movie I own a copy of. So that private investigators are one of those jobs that seem to only exist in the movies. There are, in fact, people who are real private investigators. And I was curious because I had no idea myself how accurate these movies' depictions of being a private investigator, what you're allowed to do as a private investigator, what licensing requirements you have or responsibilities you have as a private investigator. So I did kind of a deep dive into that. And then, Mike, you're going to talk a bit about cars and pollution. And then Derrick is going to talk some about porn.
My specialty, I guess.
I guess I don't understand why we're not celebrating. I mean, we just got paid. We're all having a drink in the afternoon. What?
Forget about it, all right?
Oh, would you hold on for a goddamn second?
You're the world's worst detective.
I'm the worst?
Yeah.
The world's worst.
Didn't you hear me the first time?
Got a cool ad, though. So,
Why do you have to be such a fuck up, huh? You go around and you drink and you lie and stuff and people hate you.
sweetheart, don't say and stuff. Just say...
I hate you!
That works.
Let's talk about being a private investigator. It's interesting. I went back to try and find, like, I've done a little bit of research into this independently, but trying to figure out when private investigators or private detectives started as a thing. I'm going to focus on Europe and the US because those are the regions where I had the best resources to pull from. And in the UK, prior to 1749, the term private investigator would not have made any sense to anyone because essentially all crimes were investigated by private individuals. There were constables and night watchmen. They really only had the authority to make arrests, but they weren't there to conduct investigations of potential lawbreaking. If you were the victim of a crime, it was your responsibility to prosecute the case in court and try and find the individual responsible for the crime and all of that. If you were walking down the street and heard someone shout, "Stop, thief," basically everyone had an obligation to pursue the alleged thief and detain them, bring them to a constable or a night watchman, and they would arrest them. But then the victim had the responsibility of like proving it in court. This system was plagued by corruption because the government offered a reward for people turning in or identifying criminals, and this sort of black market of what were described as thief takers, essentially police for profit, would sometimes even collude with criminals they would commit a crime and then identify the person, who would then have to pay a fine or maybe serve a bit of time in jail, but you would get the reward, which was worth more than what you stole in the first place. And so this was like rife with con artists and unscrupulous people, because also it was fairly easy to get committed a crime back then when evidence was far less rigorously examined than it is now.
So I assume, Geoff, that there was a lot of scenarios where person A does crime, person B like somehow finds it and gets paid 20% off of that, and so on and so forth. Like, it seems like there's issues with this.
Well, and it wasn't even a portion of whatever the theft was. It was like a flat £100 sterling or something like that. And so if someone stole something, and obviously I'm not sure it was like £100 sterling. That was probably quite a bit of money in 1749.
I would assume so.
But it seemed to have been fairly disconnected from like the value of whatever was taken. This all changed in 1749 when the first sort of publicly funded police force was formed. They were called the Bow Street Runners, not to be confused with the band, the Bay City Rollers. They were set up by a magistrate judge, Henry Fielding, and they essentially did detective work and were paid by the government for that job, in the way detectives are now. Their tenure sort of ended in 1829 when the Metropolitan Police was formed. And that took over the handling of police work and investigations in London. So it was only starting in about 1949 when a distinction between a private investigator and a public investigator became even necessary, because prior to that, they were all private. At the same time, in France, they had sort of the converse. They had for a long time, and my French is non-existent. I'm gonna say this is pronounced Maréchaussée, Marecaussee, which for us translates to a marshalsea. They began as a military police under the control of the king, and then evolved into essentially a police force of the entire civilian population in France and its territories. They were responsible, the police themselves, the Maréchaussée, conducted trials and imposed sentences, and there was no appeal. They were essentially the entire criminal justice system in France up until around the Revolution. That organization, or that entity, still exists today, but they're the Gendarmerie Nationale. They're basically the national police and are the militarized half of the police in France, a counterpart to the national police.
And we apologize to all French people for
Just
French.
Just a
I
generic.
studied Spanish in high school.
I did too, but hence a generic apology is necessary. Now we can move on.
But so France has essentially always had public police, and there wasn't a private. There were no private investigators because they weren't going to participate in the trial system. There was all of that stuff was completely different. that started to change around when the revolution happened in the 1790s. And Eugene Francois Vidocq was the first established the first private detective agency in France in 1833. He ended up working with the London police to identify their headquarters, which became known as Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard is where the Metro police in London are located or are headquartered. And one of their former policemen, Charles Frederick Field, is regarded as the first UK private investigator. He became a private investigator in 1852. I don't know if he was the first. It's difficult to say whether he was the first or just the first one to gain like enough notoriety that his name is still known now. But he was also rumored to have been a Bow Street runner. He was certainly a retired police from Scotland Yard. He was interestingly a friend of Charles Dickens and is the basis for his Inspector Bucket character in the book Bleak House.
Oh, cool.
Which, in reading up on this, we should do Bleak House sometime.
The book, or is there a movie?
There are several adaptations.
Okay.
There's apparently a very good BBC adaptation, but it's like a 15-part miniseries.
Also, as soon as I said that, I could have guessed that there were adaptations because it's in the public domain.
Sure. Yeah.
As soon as it's in the public domain, and everyone's like, let's make a bunch of movies about it.
Yeah.
See Sherlock Holmes.
So that was the UK and France. In the US, Alan Pinkerton founded the Pinkerton National Detective Agency in 1850. And that was the earliest private investigator or private detective agency that I was able to find. Interestingly, in 1861, they foiled a plot to assassinate President Lincoln. I guess they then took 1865 off for some reason. But they became synonymous with strike breaking and union busting. All of this is to say that although the system became slightly less corrupt when you introduce publicly funded police to investigate crimes, this was all still very highly corrupt. And so governments turned to imposing licensing requirements before you can be a private investigator. And now we will turn to what those licensing requirements are, particularly in California, where this movie is set. It's set in 1977. I do not have the exact text of the law in California as it existed in 1977, but the law as it exists now is pretty well consistent. Some of the wording has changed, but from what I could gather, the substance of the law of the licensing of private investigators has stayed pretty consistent since around the 1950s in California.
Sometimes I feel okay about things. Not often. Could try for an investigator's license. Become a PI. Those guys help people. Maybe then I'd feel good in the morning.
We also hear Marsh, Ryan Gosling's character, talk a little bit about his background. And it doesn't seem like either of them would actually qualify to be private investigators under California law, because you have to, among other things, at least have 6,000 hours of paid experience doing investigative work before you can become a private investigator. That pretty much amounts to being a police officer, or you could be perhaps a tax investigator or something like that. Someone who is paid by the government to investigate criminal activity. So just being like a bailiff in a courtroom would not qualify. Being a lawyer with having prosecuted or defended criminal in criminal trials would only count as 2 of those 6,000 credit hours that you need to have, which I found interesting, and probably fairly appropriate. Being a lawyer, you do we all do some like factual investigation, particularly through the process of discovery and things like that. Um, if you're a litigator, not a transactional attorney.
I was going to say, like, it'd be very difficult to specify a type of law that you could have done to make for less time, but but I also understand why the fact that like there's no reason why shouldn't like I tomorrow couldn't feel like I couldn't be a private investigator at all. I don't think the law has helped me in any way to do that, even if I was doing criminal work, which I'm not.
So yeah, you have to pass a test. Um, you have to go through a criminal background check, and you have to be 18 years old or older in order to be a private investigator. Now, neither of them, neither Marsh nor Healy, indicate that they were former police officers. And given, I would hope, given Marsh's ineptitude, that he would not have been a police officer, but in the 1970s, who the hell knows? Maybe even today, who the hell knows?
He has moments of clarity, I'd say.
He does, yes.
I believe, but I believe most of his moments are thanks to his very young daughter.
That and his incredible durability, which is, I guess, not. It's funny, in the first 15 minutes of the movie, he's like made out of glass, like literally punches glass and cuts his hand open. And then from that point on, from the point that Russell Crowe breaks his arm, he's just shockingly indestructible.
Sure.
And Ryan Gosling nails the physical comedy. Like
and he can fall down anything, get run over, it doesn't matter. He is bullets, nothing hits him.
I remember going to see Barbie, and I had doubts that he could like be funny because I hadn't seen this movie, and I wish I had seen this first because I would have known like, oh yeah, he's actually a very funny guy.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he definitely holds his own with a Shane Black script. So yeah. Speaking of him punching a window and cutting himself, he's doing that to gain access to a bar after it is closed in order to potentially get their credit card receipts so that he can see whether the missing person he is searching for used one. You can't actually, under the law, a private investigator can't access private property that's not generally open to the public without consent. Just as for police officers, they would have to get consent for a search or a warrant. Private investigators don't even have the benefit of a warrant. So had he gained entry into the building, he would have been violating the law and could have his license suspended or revoked as a result. What they do have the authority to do is fairly broad. You can investigate crime or wrongs done or threatened against the United States or any state or territory of the United States, perform identity and background checks, investigate the location or try and recover lost or stolen property, investigate the causes of fires, accidents, damage or injury to persons or property, and you can secure evidence to be used before a court or investigatory board, things like that. Interestingly, attorneys are exempt from having to get a license to do a lot of these things. We are obviously subject to the rules of ethics, but an attorney could also investigate a crime or the cause of an accident or something like that without having to get a whole nother license on top of it. So I found that interesting. This all, by the way, is from the California Business and Professions Code, chapter 11.3, section 7521. Like I said, there are a private investigator isn't allowed to just what we often see them do in media, which is like break into a building after hours or sneak into someone's house or hack their phone or things like that. You're not actually allowed to do that as a private investigator. There are a lot of different restrictions on what you can and cannot do. In addition to what I mentioned earlier about entering private property without consent, you're not allowed to divulge anything you get in your investigation to any third party. You may disclose such information to law enforcement officers, but it's discretionary unless they have a court order directing you to, you have to obey a court order. Or if the law requires you to disclose something.
So what you're saying, Geoff, is that every single PI we see in every TV show or movie is probably operating inappropriately.
Pretty much.
For whatever it's worth, I don't like this movie in particular. It's not pretending like Ryan Gosling's doing the right thing by breaking into the building. They're not pretending he's operating under color of the law.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. And the movie is correct in that it assumes he's a bad PI who does illegal PI things.
Yep.
Right.
We have seen, interestingly, another private investigator doing work in California, in LA. Mickey, what's the Lincoln lawyer's last name?
Mickey Holler.
Mickey Holler. He employs an investigator. However, as an employee, you don't have to have a private investigator's license unless you are hiring yourself out as a private investigator. He, as an employee of a law firm or an employee of any business, it seems does not need to get a license to be a private investigator, as long as they are conducting their work in connection with their employer's business.
Oh, interesting. So he's okay. So he doesn't have to do the 6,000 hours and get a PI license and anything because he's working for one person and he's an employee.
Yes.
But
that's my read of California law.
But if he was to put out Cisco PI Inc., he would have had
need to get a license.
Forgot his name is Cisco until right now.
Well, one of us has watched it a lot. One of us has not watched it a lot.
Sure. Private investigators can't use a badge in connection with their work. They cannot use a title, wear a uniform, or any identification card or anything like that that gives the impression that they are a government officer in the course of their work, which I'll come back to in a minute. And they, like lawyers, cannot directly solicit someone who has been harmed to investigate their injury. That sort of direct solicitation is not allowed. What they can do is solicit people who indirectly have an interest in investigating a harm done to somebody. So they can directly solicit an attorney who's working on behalf of someone who is injured, or that person's insurance company, which is a big employer of private investigators, it turns out.
That makes sense.
Yeah. They're not they are not, by virtue of having a private investigator's license, allowed to carry a concealed weapon. They still have to get that separate permit, which I think Marsh in this in The Nice Guys violates a lot. He seems to always have a gun on him, or he'll dream up that Healy always has a gun on him.
You don't
know her upbringing.
You gotta face this.
You don't know why she...
Shit.
No.
What's wrong with him?
I don't know. I'm gonna ask him. Marge?
Yeah.
What the fuck are you doing?
Did you move it?
Move what?
The fucking gun.
What gun?
The fucking ankle gun.
Who told you I had an ankle gun?
The other day in the car before we crashed, you're like, oh, check out my ankle gun. You said, you showed me your ankle gun.
Come on, are you serious? Are you fucking serious?
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Did I dream that?
Yeah. You moron. You dreamt it.
No. Yeah, you're right. That was
Just shut up. Shut up!
So that's sort of a very brief overview of what private investigators are allowed and not allowed to do. The other thing I wanted to look into is whether or not they are given deference by the law or by law enforcement officers under the law. And it's kind of a mixed bag. There were a couple of cases actually from around when this movie is set that are enlightening. We'll put it that way. The first is People v. Mangiafico, out of California from 1972. The private investigator in question was a specialist in identifying the causes of fires, and he was hired by an insurance company to investigate the cause of a fire. Because very often they're like, actually the case goes into some detail of why it would make sense for a fire, for an insurance company to employ a private investigator without suspecting arson necessarily, because if the cause was negligence or something unexpected, then they can kind of fold that into their education of their insurance policyholders, or included in their policies themselves. If you're found to have, I don't know, be a smoker, then
if you're a bad electrician,
cost is going to go up. Yeah, things like that. Or if you live too close to PSE&G power lines, that's been a problem lately. I guess we don't know what the fires in LA.
Yeah, I also don't. I imagine if you bought a house near PSE&G power lines, that's not your fault. Like that's not. I don't think that's a reason the insurance wouldn't cover you.
And who knows?
PSE&G might be at fault, but I don't know.
Apparently a lot of, we don't have to go into the fires and stuff, but apparently there are whole communities that insurance companies just won't offer insurance anymore because of, in part, like, you're served by PSE&G, so.
Or climate change. Like it's. In one sense, I don't know, we shouldn't spend too much time on insurance, but in one sense, it's this industry where like, oh yeah, if it's going well, people are just giving you money forever and you never give them anything back. On the other hand, the downside is potentially infinite.
Yeah.
Like if the policy is, we'll pay for your home to be replaced, like if it's not capped, then like the value of the home goes up, or the cost of rebuilding it goes up, and the frequency at which it burns down goes up. Like,
yeah. With regard to how much deference they get from law enforcement officers and things like that, at this private investigator's request, the county fire department reenacted their efforts to put out this particular fire so that the private investigator could know exactly what impact they had. So that's an entire fire department reenacting an event like that is showing a fair amount of deference to what is essentially some guy.
How did they have to coerce them somehow? Did they just ask them to do it and they all volunteered?
I don't know. The court just said that they, at his request, did this reenactment. The question in the case was whether or not his activities were law enforcement activities and whether or not the Fourth Amendment applied to what he was doing. And the court concluded that if a private investigator is engaged by law enforcement or some other government agency to investigate crimes, then yes, the Fourth Amendment applies. But here, where he is hired by an insurance company, there's no, at the time, suspicion of arson or any sort of wrongdoing. They just want to know what caused the fire. Then the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply. He's acting as a private citizen on behalf of a private citizen. There's no need for like a warrant or for him to have probable cause, exigent circumstances. Any of those Fourth Amendment considerations don't apply in that situation. Now that contrasts in an interesting way with a case that came later, Cervantes v. J.C. Penney in 1979. In that instance, a police officer who was moonlighting as private security for the J.C. Penney department store was arrested someone for essentially shoplifting. Interestingly, I want to call out here that right under current California law, private security and private investigators are treated differently. They're under different sections of the same chapter of the law. But it seems that at the time, private security and private investigators were governed by the same statute back then. So I wanted to make that clear, because technically I'm not talking about a private investigator. I'm talking about someone working as private security. But the officer arrested these two guys that he suspected of being members of a theft ring that were hitting department stores in Orange County. He also, I pulled this quote directly from the case. Quote, he also testified that plaintiff was wearing an open, long-sleeved, untucked shirt, similar to the mode of dress of a narcotics addict. End quote.
What the fuck?
And I thought, just having an unbuttoned long-sleeve shirt is an indicator that you're addicted to narcotics in the 1970s.
Or 90 other things.
Yeah.
That's outstanding.
So he tailed them through the store for a while and watched them being generally suspicious. And then after they left the Pennies, he detained them, found that they did have stolen items in their bag. When he was detaining them, he identified himself as a police officer working security for Pennies. Not that he was being paid pennies, but he was working for J.C. Penney's. And the court went to an interesting... The court's reasoning here is very interesting, because the question was whether or not he was working as a police officer when he arrested them or private security, because a police officer can't receive payment from a private individual or company for performing their official duties. That's true of any government official. And the court said, quote, since it would have been illegal for Dalkey, the private investigator or the private security, since it would have been illegal for Dalkey to have been acting as a peace officer in the performance of official duties at the time he arrested plaintiff, we conclude that Dalkey was acting as a private citizen when he arrested the plaintiff. So the fact that otherwise it would be illegal meant that they would say he was acting as a private citizen in this instance, despite the fact that he identified himself as a police officer, which private investigators, even in the 1970s, weren't allowed to do under the law. So these decisions seem wildly inconsistent. Either they are law enforcement officers or they're not, and it seems entirely dependent on how the court wants things to come out, which is honestly pretty standard for the courts.
Well, in fairness, I'm about to get into the pornography later, and that's pretty much what happens with pornography. It's like
it's true.
The courts make a test that they want to go one way or another. Well, actually, that just describes con law, but let's not get into that right now.
Yeah. So, that was sort of the upshot of my research. Those, as depicted in the movie, they do a lot of stuff that they would not be allowed to do as private investigators. They wouldn't even qualify to be private investigators in the first place. People who are private investigators, though, seem to get a fair amount of deference from law enforcement or police departments or what have you, at least to some degree. So maybe all the cops in LA would look the other way, or the licensing board would look the other way with these activities. Who the hell knows?
Hi everyone, Derrick here with a brief message. The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by my law firm, Moore Law PLLC. One of Moore Law PLLC's many practice areas is business law. If you are a business owner or someone who is thinking of starting up a new or side business, you need a legal team who can efficiently provide you legal counsel, keeping you and your business away from potential legal issues, and if necessary, representing you in any disputes that do arise. We pride ourselves on being cost efficient while also getting to know our clients. If you want less stress and more support, you need Moore Law. If you would like to set up a free consult, please click on the link in the show notes, visit our website, www.mooreatty.com, that's mooreatty.com, or email us at contact@mooreatty.com. And now, back to the show.
So with that lengthy discussion out of the way, I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Okay, so I'm going over auto regulations and catalytic converters, which sounds extremely exciting and is just as riveting as you can imagine. The movie centers around, or at least the backdrop of the movie as it's happening, is new regulations affecting cars, causing, I guess, the auto industry to fight them, and that triggers a bunch of events in the background. So the auto industry is trying to cover up or suppress the need for catalytic converters. Meanwhile, Margaret Qualley, saying that right? Her character is trying to expose them by putting out a porno that has the secrets that the auto industry is trying to cover up in it.
All right, so then your solution was you make a porn film.
It's not a porno!
You know, I have neighbors.
I made a statement.
Right?
And yeah, my statement contained nudity.
Porno nudity.
That's just the commercial element, okay? Okay? Sid said we had to have that. And the reality was we were getting our message out there. And it was all in the film. Names and dates and everything that my mom was doing. And once it was out there, once it was in theaters, there's no way that they could suppress it. There's no way that they could cover it up.
So let me get this straight. You made a porno film where the point was the plot.
What's your hang up, man?
It's not the sex. It's what's in the story.
What are catalytic converters? So catalytic converters were mandated as a result of the Clean Air Act of 1970. They started rolling out in cars in the model year 1975. So that actually probably would have been the first ones might have been available in the end of 1974 then. So that part I'm a little confused about in the movie itself, because the movie takes place in 1977, so there already would have been mandates for catalytic converters. But catalytic converters work. But I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that at all. But
no, it's interesting. I wonder then why they so specifically said it in 1977.
And the
regulations were already in place.
I couldn't figure that out, and it might be that like it was still rolling out in pieces. There were other effects of this, so because of the rollout of catalytic converters, they then had to ban lead paints, or lead gasoline, because they destroy catalytic converters, which that had a nice knock-on effect of we don't breathe in poisonous lead. So
yeah, that is nice.
That's a nice knock-on effect, and like that alone may have caused an increase in IQ rates across the country. So environmental regulation can be very good.
Yeah, between asbestos and getting lead out of gas and paint.
Yep.
We're all a lot better off.
Yes, absolutely. So just to, I guess, jump into it. Catalytic converter is an emission control machine. This is from Wikipedia. It helps convert toxic gases and pollutants and exhaust gas from an internal combustion engine into a less toxic pollutants. It does this because it has a bunch of really valuable it does this by having a bunch of chemical reactions that are triggered by some very valuable minerals in your catalytic converter, which is why they get stolen off of cars. They're filled with platinum and other metals. So
interesting.
Yeah. They typically have platinum, palladium, and I don't know how to say this one, rhodium. Rhodium, which is apparently the most valuable of them.
Palladium, isn't that what Iron Man's little arc reactor is made of?
That would make sense. Sure.
Okay.
That sounds real. But some of the key benefits of this have been
sorry, it's just that sounds real.
That sounds real. Yeah.
It's funny to say of Iron Man, but okay.
Significantly reduced air pollution, impact on fuel and engine design, which is they had to phase out the lead they had to phase out lead, so it wouldn't destroy the catalytic converters, which meant the entire engine had to be redesigned, because the reason lead was originally put into gasoline is it helps the engine. So they had to design engines that could withstand unleaded gasoline.
Huh.
It's still terrible. There's no justification for it, but it helped it helped certain engines survive.
That's interesting. I guess I just always assumed that it was the lead was somehow a natural byproduct of the refining process,
Nope.
and that
It's intentionally
further
added.
refining had to be done to remove it. That's fascinating. Okay.
I do actually have notes on that too. So it prevents engine knocking, enhanced performance. You can have higher octane gas, and it's supposed to be relatively cost effective. It's still terrible. It's not worth the entire world being poisoned.
Right.
But it's one of these things where, like, wow, crime went down in areas that leaded gasoline was phased out, because having lead in your gasoline makes it more likely that you're going to have significant learning disabilities early on, which leads to an increase in crime later on. So it's really, really bad. Lead is bad. Don't drink lead. Don't breathe in lead.
Heard it. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Breaking news.
Lead bad. Don't take legal advice from us.
Do take health advice.
Don't take health advice from us.
Literally don't take any advice out of this podcast.
So, two notes. Originally, when I took this topic, I thought I was going to be talking all about Chevron deference, which is a major way that administrative law is now handled. So, like the EPA, which helped regulate catalytic converters, now for 40 years has been regulating fuel efficiency and slowly taking up, how efficient your car has to be, or what pollutants they're allowed to release. And they've been doing that through this thing called Chevron deference. This movie predates Chevron deference. I don't have to worry about it. We'll talk about that some other day. And Chevron may or may not still be in effect. The state of the law.
Death of Chevron deference.
Yeah, it's kind. I understand. So for the listener, Geoff and Derrick are shaking their heads no, because they think it's been completely overturned. It's still kind of standing a little bit. We're still dealing with the ghost of Chevron. So let's wait till this law gets settled a little bit.
There are still lingering effects, sure.
Yeah,
but that's a conversation for another day.
That's a conversation for another day. So we'll go over Chevron. I don't know. We'll find a better movie to talk about Chevron. And then I don't really talk about the actual legal case. There is a legal case in this movie where Margaret Qualley's mom, who I cannot remember who plays Margaret Qualley's mom in this movie.
Kim Basinger. There
we go. I guess is convicted of her many crimes. We don't see any of that. We just see her being convicted afterwards. Or I guess walking out after she got in trouble.
Read the fucking newspaper. What's good for Detroit is good for America.
Unbelievable.
The America I love owes its life to the big three.
But it's all right for you to fail your daughter?
Detroit had her killed.
I think you're right about that. The whole city got together, took a vote. Big turnout.
I wanted her safe. That's why I hired you two.
You're going to jail, Miss Cutner.
I might be going to jail, but it won't make a difference. You can't take Detroit down. And if I'm not there to take care of it, someone else will be.
Okay, well, we shall see.
We should mention that, like, the things that they were doing to cover up the crime, they were trying to prevent the release of a film that would expose the lies that it's supposed to be the big three auto, but it's sort of like the city of Detroit is somehow the enemy in this movie, which they kind of say. It involves, like, hiring multiple trained assassins to kill a bunch of people, commit arson, probably some other crimes in there too. Kim Basinger hires a killer to kill her own daughter, which random piece of trivia that I have, and I started researching this because I thought I'd seen more movies that this happened in, but it turns out I've only seen 2 of them. Can you guys guess movies that Margaret Qualley's in that she dies in? Are you aware? Have you seen other movies that she's in?
I may have. I'd have to look at her IMDb.
Yeah, so honestly, I'd have to look to see like if I've seen any of her movies.
So I thought I'd seen a bunch of movies that she dies in because I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I thought, oh, she must die at the end of that. She does not. She survives that. She dies in The Substance. She dies in... Oh, where'd my notes go?
Oh, I didn't see The Substance.
Yeah. Nice Guys, Death Note, which that sounds about right. Danny Broke, Native Son, Kinds of Kindness, and The Substance. So she dies in like 5 of the like 10 movies that she's in.
Interesting. Well, so she's the new Sean Bean.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty Sean Bean. Have you seen The Substance yet, either of you?
No.
Nope. We cannot... There's no way we could possibly do it for this, but it was probably my favorite movie of 2024.
Interesting. Okay.
She melts into a puddle of goo.
Oh, fun.
Spoiler alert there.
Gets,
yeah.
That's just good acting right there.
Honestly, it's great. Yeah.
She pulls an Alex Mack. Okay.
More of a Carrie.
90s reference.
Not just Mike can do random references. Geoff can too.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got for the actual topic.
So allow me to ask a question.
Of course.
Why the hell would the auto industry be trying to do something like? What was the point of what the auto industry was doing in this film theoretically?
I guess because catalytic converters cost money, and this also falls into like the arena of big conspiracy, where big conspiracy happens because they're the bad guys and they're big and powerful, and that's why they're doing it. Catalytic converters, like I couldn't find a ton of evidence of the auto industry fighting it. I am sure that they did because they always fight extra regulation.
Sure.
In this
but it
case,
wouldn't have taken the form of like lobbying.
No, yeah, it wouldn't have taken the form of mass murder. Like that would have gotten them in much more trouble. At least maybe.
Except in the movie, it didn't.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
But and also the scheme is very vague. Like we know what the plans of the people who made the movie within the movie.
Yes. Very meta.
Were to expose something they were doing.
Yep.
But we never actually get to the point where that is explained to us, the audience, because obviously we do not see the entire adult video that they produced to get the word out.
It seems like that could have been an extra on the DVD.
I also think that's just Shane Black in many ways, right? Like the plot is actually the facts of whatever he's doing is not important to the plot of the movie. Like what's important is the incoherency of the movie and just action, entertainment, excitement.
Right.
It
doesn't need to be along for the ride.
Correct.
Same thing in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
It doesn't need to puzzle together. It doesn't need to make sense.
Yeah,
it just has to be entertaining all the way through.
It's a MacGuffin. The movie that they have to save is the MacGuffin, and they have to, I guess that's interesting because it's a MacGuffin that you don't actually know is a MacGuffin until halfway through the movie.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, I had one last thing. I had one last bit of trivia. Who created the EPA?
Oh, Richard Nixon.
The EPA plays a part in this. Richard Nixon, obviously, who has a cameo in this movie.
Right.
The famous Richard Nixon cameo in The Nice Guys. Yes.
We'll drop in a clip of the Nixon thing.
Yes.
He doesn't say anything. He's underwater.
Right, but I mean, Ryan Gosling Russell Crowe talking about the guy dying and Nixon being like, "You'll be okay." That was my Nixon impersonation.
Think about it from that guy's point of view, okay? The guy who died. He's lying there on the ground, staring up at the sky near death. And then former President Richard Nixon appears before him and tells him he's going to be fine. Now, did he think that's normal? Right? That before they die, everybody sees Nixon?
You're expecting an angel and you get Nixon.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's the same situation, just a vastly different point of view.
So there's 2 ways to look at something.
Yeah.
That's the point of the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, just say that.
What?
Well, you just leave me on this epic fucking journey with the story, and 10 minutes later, the point is that there's 2 ways to look at something. You could just say that.
You like that story?
That would be awful.
Wouldn't it, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of the adult film that is the MacGuffin in this film, Derrick. Why don't we talk about obscenity and pornography and the 1970s?
Unless, guys, I did not think that this quick I was going to talk about porn on the podcast, but here we are.
We keep vetoing it. You keep proposing that we talk about porn in every episode.
He's got a lot of opinions on Deep Throat. Just deep opinions.
We have cut out like every single episode. I do a 5 minutes on pornography, and it keeps getting cut every time, and we're not really sure
every
why.
time.
Jeez, I can't get anything out. But finally, we have a reason. Although it's actually not even that great of a reason, because even though porn is like this whole movie is sort of deals with a porn movie, but it doesn't really mean anything in the show. Like, it's not like the porn itself is legal or illegal or anything else. It's just a way to sort of have this trope.
We do have Kim Basinger's character, who is a DOJ official or DOJ attorney of some sort, fairly high up, is on some sort of anti-porn crusade, apparently.
I need your help. But I want to know if I can trust you.
I'm kind of getting the idea that, you might not have much choice.
Well, my situation is very delicate.
That's where I know you from, right? The TV. You're prosecuting that car company thing.
The lawsuit for the catalytic converter, yes. That's half my day. The other half I spend on pornography.
What kind? Like which films? What's your favorite?
No. Anti-porn.
Right.
Like a crusader.
Should I be writing this down?
Yeah, write it down.
Yeah, you could tell she's part of the sort of just anti-pornography movement, which now in 2025 is now becoming another thing, because that is certainly the last couple of years there has been a very big push by mostly conservative politicians to push not even just in their own states, but I think like the goal is to eventually try to like get rid of porn. Good luck with that, but here we are.
Yeah. The Comstock Act is suddenly relevant again.
A lot of laws in 2025 are currently relevant that we would not think would be relevant nowadays. Anywho, back onto porn. So I thought it would be a nice little time to dive deep into the history of sort of pornography, obscenity, and talk about sort of how it's dealt on the legal end. So with this movie being set in 1977, I would have thought that like I was going to say the following phrase. The law at the time was X, now the law is Y. Interestingly, when it comes to obscenity and whether something can be, whether the government, whether it's the state or federal government, could prevent certain sort of obscene, whether it's videos or some type of media, from being put out into the public, the law is actually the same. It has changed a little bit, but the overarching test, which criminalizes obscene material, really hasn't changed since 1973, which is, one, confusing, especially in the fact that, let's be honest, 1973, it was mostly public videos, magazines, things like that. We now have the inner tubes. Slightly things have changed. The ability to access porn has changed, and yet the sort of overarching test as to whether something is obscene and can be criminalized hasn't changed much. And I'm saying this currently on January 20th, 2025, knowing that the Supreme Court is currently taking up a case on pornography, which certainly could change this. So if it takes us a few months to get this out, we might have to redo this entire part of the podcast. Hopefully, well, I say hopefully, I don't know which direction I want the current case to go in, but what I can say is we'll see if there's a decision by the time we put this out. But to go back in time a little bit, in the 50s and 60s, there was a real attempt in the United States to start banning obscene material. There was a lot of state laws that were signed into the law that like outlawed certain material, and it was all done under the guise of like preventing young people, children from seeing it. That was based, and honestly, that's kind of coming back now in 2025. Like there are a lot of states that are claiming we're trying to protect, children and minors from getting access to porn. but they're doing so by just either fully outlawing it or making it very difficult for even adults to actually watch it. And that was what was going back in the 1950s. There were a bunch of state statutes that outlawed material, and one of which was the sort of really where the cases in this front of the Supreme Court started, was in the late 1950s. In 1957, there was Butler v. Michigan, that involved a Michigan statute that outlawed printed material that included obscene language that was quote unquote manifestly tending to the corruption of the morals of youth. So it completely outlawed material that supposedly did that. It was a 9-0 Supreme Court decision that struck down that statute. And that was sort of where this case law of pornography slowly moved along. So there, in that same year, in 1957, there was a case called Roth v. Michigan that put forth the first test for obscenity as to when you can criminalize something. In other words, prevent the public from seeing it, or even just reduce the amount of people that can see it. That was the first time where a test came out, and the test was basically, if something is, they tried to define obscene, and they did it in a very broad way, but what was important about that case was that anything that had the slightest, quote, redeeming social importance still was fully protected by the First Amendment. So in other words, it allowed more pornography, more obscene works, media, things to come into the marketplace because they were getting First Amendment protection. And for the non-lawyers out there, basically, Geoff, Mike, and I are fully aware of this. Back in constitutional law, everything was about tests. Like, the court was coming up with these tests, and they would basically take the facts of the case, and they would figure out whether they would meet or not meet a certain test. And I actually went back, funny enough, to my con law outline, because, as you guys may have had, I basically had porn day in my constitutional law class, where all you talked about was obscenity for an entire class, or maybe even 2 classes. Unfortunately, I did not take great notes, so I had to go back and do this again. I did not think in 2007 that I was going to take good enough notes in constitutional law for 2025 podcast on the nice guys, but you want to know what? I was just not thinking ahead. But the short version is, constitutional law is all about tests, and it's kind of bullshit because the court is putting certain tests forward in hopes that it's going to go one direction or another. It's less about whether the test is actually a real test. It's more about how do we work the test a little bit so it meets our standards. And that was kind of what happened in the sort of Roth case back in the day. Was the test was very easy to not be obscene. It was very easy for something to have any social important, like any redeeming social importance, which allowed porn to come into the public. And there was, a few other cases. There was Jacobellis v. Ohio in 64. That included, and I'm sure Mike and Geoff remember this, and a lot of people have talked about this, the famous concurring opinion of Justice Potter Stewart, I know it when I see it. That was and I specifically remember having that conversation in constitutional law class, where Justice Potter Stewart apparently knows porn when he sees it. And and honestly, that was the sort of indication of, like, it is very hard to define what is obscene, what is pornography. And the Supreme Court has, really struggled with it for years. Fun fact, Potter Stewart said later on he regretted saying that about obscenity because he knew that he was going to be remembered for that phrase. Like, he kind of said, like, I've written some really good things in my life, but basically I'm going to be remembered for that if I remember for anything, which is kind of funny.
Oh, that poor guy.
Yep.
I mean, but anyway. It's interesting though, because where do you draw the line between art and something that's obscene?
I mean, honestly, this movie's a good example of that. Let's say you had a pornography that did uncover some massive evil conspiracy from 3 of the largest companies in the country, what could it do that would, like, at what point would you no longer justify unveiling that? What would it have to do for you to say, nope, it has no redeeming value? Like, how bad would it have to be?
I think in this instance, the inclusion of the information that they were trying to get across at all would, no matter what else it had in it. Well, maybe not. I don't want to say no matter what else.
So I'm going to get there in a second because it talks about the work because we're going to talk about the work as a whole. Like that's really what the decision is going to be. Is like certain aspects can be absolutely unbelievably obscene, but you have to look at the work as a whole and see if there's any sort of literary value to it. And so I'll actually sort of go forward to that, which is the current case that is really the test for what can be considered obscene was articulated in Miller v. California, which was in 1973, and fun fact, talked about the California obscenity law, which was certainly be applicable here. And in that decision, the Chief Justice Warren Burger laid out the three-part test, which is basically there are three things.
Test.
The Supreme Court loves three-part tests. And this one, to determine whether something is obscene, which means that could be criminalized, you have to look at first whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work, taken as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest, which is sort of defined as being like, I'm very much summarizing this, but I'm just going to say that, if something appeals to the prurient interest, it basically means that it is associated with desiring to engage in sexual conduct or viewing sexually explicit conduct. It sort of defines itself, but short version, that's what it is. Second, whether the work depicts or describes in an offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by applicable state law, so that allows states to say different things if they want to. And third, whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Now, that's a little different because it says lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, which
not just
before,
a modicum of...
Correct. Before it was, does it have any social importance or, and in fact, it was social importance at one point. It went down to social value at one point. Now it has to lack serious. I would argue, based on what we know about the pornography, the porn movie, or whatever the heck we call it in the film, it is probably has serious value, given the fact that it took down an entire, CEO of the auto industry, blah, blah, blah. I would assume so. Sure. I haven't seen it. I don't really know. But I'm going to make an assumption that based on what they told us, that it would probably be something that would not have been criminalized. Like, they wouldn't have been able to prevent the average person from seeing the movie if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Based on what we know.
I think based on their description and also the dialogue within the movie, we get a bit of like the first couple of minutes,
right?
And even what's said there would seem to say that it has some political value at the very least.
Correct. Yeah, right. The typical intro to a porno, which is normally just slowly setting you up for the actual sex, is actually very much value, is very valuable in the sense that it is at least, I don't know, literary value, maybe political value, whatever you want to call it.
It's not a pizza man making a delivery.
Look, hey, listen, that could have been the next part of it. We don't know. Mm-hmm. We didn't actually hear anything, but
Well, I'm Bulging Paulson, and I represent the Detroit auto manufacturers. That's who the hell I am.
You poison our air. The people won't stand for it.
So listen, the short version of all of this is that this is actually still the law as it is today. There's been a few clarifications over the years, but not much has changed. I am curious if it's going to change soon. The Supreme Court on January 15th held oral argument in a case, Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton, based on a Texas law that requires porn sites to verify official documentation, like a government-issued ID, or face hefty fines. And there's, I think, upwards of 19 states right now that have some form of verification required on porn sites. In fact, to the point where some have just decided not to operate in certain states anymore, which is now leading to the American population to learn about a thing called VPNs, virtual private networks, and make it look like your computer is in a different state.
Or country.
Or country, as the case may be. I think I read somewhere that like the day the Florida law went into effect, the amount of Googling of VPN went up by like 2 or 3-fold, which is probably not shocking by any stretch of the imagination. But I will be very curious if, when the Supreme Court makes this decision, if they are now going to put in a new law. Like, do we now have, God, I hate to say it, the Paxton Law, or the Paxton Test, or the Free Speech Coalition Test? I'm assuming it's the Paxton Test because they always go with the last name of someone to make a test. Is that going to be the new porn obscenity test? And based on the fact that the Roberts Court has no problem coming up with new tests and rejecting previous tests, I will be not shocked if that happens. But the short version of all of this, based on, as it relates to the movie, is that the porno that we don't see, or at least we see a very small aspect of, would probably not be considered obscene. It could probably, it is probably likely that the state of California or someone could not have criminalized watching that movie. It could be out in public and the public can watch it. Now, there's of course the question of like, could they have done something that would have reduced the possibility of like a minor seeing it, a child seeing it?
Sure.
It's possible, but they certainly couldn't have just criminalized that generally.
Yeah. I mean, at the time it would have been, getting the someone in like a gas station trying to buy a magazine, presenting their ID to prove they're 18 or what have you.
They do, I guess, commit some crimes with it where they are playing it to a huge crowd of people without checking if anyone is a minor there, which we know at least one minor that is there.
That's true. Yeah.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's for them to have just generally put it up into the public and just allow a huge group of people to see it. That may have not been appropriate of itself, but the movie specifically could not have been like banned, for instance. So,
sure.
Yes.
There are a few questions of, they have spliced this into a what was supposed to be essentially an industry promo reel, meaning that they're forcing people to watch it without agreeing to do that ahead of time. And there is a kid there. That actually, a thought that I had, knowing that this was one of the things we were going to discuss tonight, when I rewatched the film, at the beginning, there is, and there isn't really any good sound that we can drop in here, but at the very beginning of the film, a kid takes his dog outside, lets the dog back in, steals a magazine from under a parent's bed, is looking at it. Then a car comes crashing through the house that happens to have an adult film actress in it. And it was interesting as I was watching how they edit around the fact that they can't actually have this, what appears to be like a 12-year-old kid looking at porn in the movie. Yep. They also probably can't have him looking at a naked woman post car accident in the movie. And the interesting ways that they edit around that, so you don't really notice it unless you're looking for it. Yeah. Because like, we only see the magazine open from a first person perspective, so we don't have to like see the kid holding the magazine looking at it. We do see him holding a closed magazine.
Same with the naked porn actress, who it's never really explained why she was naked at the time, but she gets into it.
I mean, she's naked because what else? She obviously has to be a porn actress.
It's a Shane
she's
Black
naked.
movie.
Yeah,
obviously. Like,
I mean, like the scene's really cool. It's a really dramatic car accident that like just sort of happens in the background, and then she's front and center. But yes, she's naked in a car accident because she's a porn actress.
Correct. Yeah. Obviously, I mean, we all know that's how that's the only way to depict a porn actress is to have her naked in the car when she was just driving, in a normal everyday life.
I think the movie's implication is she was fleeing from attackers when that car accident happened, and it is the middle of the night. So
I guess
maybe she was just in a nightgown.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Possible. I mean, listen,
the movie doesn't
reasons.
Say.
I don't think the movie doesn't say, and I also was unable to find any like Q&A with Shane Black to sort of explain anything because I was just really curious. I think that's just who he is. He likes Those are his movies.
So I've not seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, but I like this movie. I've seen some of his other stuff, and this is, I would say, the best movie I've seen that he's done.
Well, we'll get to this when we talk about entertainment.
I mean, I think we're getting into it right now. Unless
I guess we are.
do you have anything else? Because I actually don't have too much on this one.
I have random notes about the movie itself.
There we go. We always love the Mike random notes.
Okay.
These are always fun.
Go for it.
Great 70s soundtrack. Originally, this wasn't supposed to originally be a period piece when they first wrote it up, and then at some point they decided to set it in the 70s, which changes the whole plot. But I think was awesome, and like it looks, maybe a little bit like the cartoon version of the 70s, but it looked awesome, and I really enjoyed it.
Sure.
My girlfriend's notes were she likes Ryan Gosling, not Ryan Reynolds. I agree with that. It was very good at subverting tropes. Like you kind of expect one thing to happen, and then they stumble upon something by complete accident, or like they got to dispose of the body to get out of there in time. Oh, they dispose of the body and dump it into a bigger party.
Yeah,
like, great little bits like that. Can you guys think of other Russell Crowe movies where they clearly set up sequels that never happened? You've seen one of them, at least.
We may still get a sequel to this.
Okay. But it's 10 years later, so we still have not gotten it.
LA Confidential, maybe?
Oh, I've actually never seen LA Confidential. I don't know if there's a sequel there. Okay,
you got to see Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. You got to see LA Confidential,
okay.
Despite Kevin Spacey being in it.
Okay. That's the one that I'm thinking of is Master and Commander.
Oh, I've never seen Master and Commander.
Master and Commander, at the very end of it, they're like, and now we go on more adventures, and that it ends. And that was 20 years ago.
I mean, that was based on a book in a lengthy series.
Yeah.
So
the Mummy movie with Tom Cruise, he's supposed to be...
Oh, shit, right.
He's supposed to be, I guess, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And there's one more that was not originally supposed to be a sequel, but then they really, really put a lot of work into it. And they did eventually make a sequel, but without Russell Crowe. That's the hint you get.
Gladiator.
Yeah, they were...
See, here's the thing. I was about to say... I didn't think they were going to do a sequel of Gladiator.
No, but they put a lot of work into it. This is from Wikipedia. The working title for it was Christ Killer. The story involved Maximus in purgatory, who is resurrected as an immortal warrior for the Roman gods. Maximus is sent back to Earth, tasked with ending Christianity by killing Jesus and his disciples, as Christianity was draining the power of the ancient pagan gods. During his mission, Maximus is tricked into murdering his own son, cursed to live forever, fights in the Crusades, World War II, Vietnam War, with the ending revealing that in the present day, the character now works for the Pentagon.
What the hell?
That was a working script that somebody was pitching, and apparently they got pretty far at one point.
That's insane.
I was reading that, and I couldn't stop laughing.
Was Ridley Scott attached to that?
Oh, I forgot. I gotta look that up.
Oh, don't.
Yep, gotta look.
Okay.
But to confirm, and I haven't watched it yet, but I'd like to watch it. Gladiator 2 centers on Lucius, the kid in Gladiator, I believe.
Steven Spielberg, who had consulted in the original film, told Scott it wasn't going to work, especially as Cave had written something too grand due to his theater work. I guess Ridley Scott was attached to it. Yeah, Nick Cave was commissioner. Right? Yeah, that's wild. So, I guess that's any other random trivia? I think that's all I got, really.
I'm trying to think if there are any other lingering legal issues to discuss.
There's a whole trial that we kind of miss, and so we don't actually see the effects of that's the MacGuffin part of it.
Yeah, because unfortunately, the part of the movie that we would have the most to talk about is yada yada yada. So we don't have.
I mean, you say that, but we've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes. So.
Yeah.
So most of that was me going on about the origins of private investigators.
Correct.
I got one more note, and this is from Hannah. The district attorney's assistant. I don't know what her title is. Do you know what we've seen her in before?
Oh, she's in Lincoln Lawyer.
She's in Lincoln Lawyer. It's Yaya, and the only reason I know who she is Hannah's watching American Next Top Model, and she was on season 2 of that. That's how she rose to fame. She's a prosecutor and a rival to Mickey Haller, is what the internet says.
Interesting. Okay.
But she's friends with his second ex-wife.
One of the wives.
Right.
The DA ex-wife. They're like good friends in the DA's office, and then just so you're aware,
Nev
she
Campbell's
ends
character?
Yes, she's friends with Nev Campbell's character, and she ends up being the main DA in like the big case in season 2.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's everything I got. I really like this movie. I thought it was excellent. I'm happy I finally got to see it.
Well, so let's go ahead and give our score, give our verdicts. Keep in mind we are working with the new rubric. We're not doing 9 justices anymore. We're now a 3-judge panel, giving either a vote yay or nay for the law and yay or nay for entertainment value.
I'm gonna go yay for entertainment value because that was very good. I'm gonna go yay for the law because I didn't really get anything. Like the things it gets wrong are the private investigators breaking the law a lot, but they're not depicted as particularly moral, upstanding characters. They're supposed to be borderline criminals.
One is not even a private investigator.
Yeah.
He kind of aspires to be. Although I will say, Derrick, do you want to go ahead? I guess I'll wrap it up with.
Sure. So I'm going to say I didn't like it as much as you guys did.
Okay.
Now, do I think it's very entertaining? Yes. There's a review of it from when it came out in 2016 that says The Nice Guys is crude, funny, fast-paced, and virtually incoherent. What's not to like? I think that describes it pretty well. The incoherent part annoys me. Like,
gotcha.
And maybe it's because, so I had never watched it before. This is the first time I ever watched it. Maybe it's because I was watching it for the podcast, and like every once in a while I'm like, that doesn't connect. Wait, that doesn't connect. Wait, that doesn't connect. Like it's a lot of like, where are we going, guys? And then they shoot Amelia. I'm like, the whole plot of this was to find her, and then they shoot like. And again,
that is a subversion, certainly. Yeah,
I'll add to that. That is one point that genuinely doesn't make sense because a scene earlier, he doesn't know what Amelia looks like. He asks a random person, "Are you Amelia?" Nope. Okay. Later, she just randomly sees a person. Oh, that's like knows that's Amelia and kills her.
Right, because she just comes up to the car and says, "Can you help me?" And he just goes, "Okay," and kills her. Basically, right?
Still liked it. Not changing my view.
Yeah. No, listen. Here's what I'm going to say. I think it passes both. Like, I think I'm going to say it's affirmed on both counts. It's affirmed on the law, and I think in the way it's affirmed on the law is like there isn't much law for it to go against because they acknowledge that they're terrible, right? Yeah. Like they acknowledge that the PI does stuff that's shady. Like almost in some ways, like his daughter is sort of the like barometer for whether he's good or not, and like. She almost calls him out on everything he does that's illegal, which is kind of funny.
She tells him he's a bad person. She tells him he's a terrible detective.
And most of the time he acknowledges that. And like Russell Crowe's character basically acknowledges once or twice of like, yeah, I don't color in the lines. Like
if Shane Black did a courtroom drama, I expect him to get a lot wrong. This is just like, I don't really care.
Correct. Yeah. So since it's a legal podcast, we don't have to focus on, some of the insanity, but on the legal side, I think it, I give it a thumbs up. It's affirmed only because there's not a lot of law to get wrong. And to the extent they get it wrong, they do it on purpose. And in terms of the entertainment, it's entertaining. I'm not saying this is going to be a consistent watch for me, but it's entertaining. If we were on our previous number of justices, it would have been a bare affirm for me. It would have been the 5-6 category, but I can give it an affirm. I can be the judge that concurs with no opinion. I just say I concur. I don't know why I concur. I'm just like,
you randomly have like a spicy shot that you take at them, like in there. It's like, well, because the law makes me do this, but I don't like it.
Right. It's the you want to know what this is? This is and I can't believe I'm using him as an example. Rarely do I say what I'm doing is basically Clarence Thomas-esque, but I'm basically doing a Clarence Thomas qualified immunity thing where like every time the court takes on qualified immunity, I go, this shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be a law, but based on the current law, the court's correct. Like that's basically what I'm doing is I don't know why I like it, but I like it.
I have one random criticism that I'm just remembering. Russell Crowe in this movie does some athletic things that Russell Crowe even 10 years ago could not possibly do. He's like diving through windows and like running. And
sure.
Like, we're at that stage of his career where like Russell Crowe's like barely, have you ever seen the Steven Seagal memes where like he shoots film sitting down because he can't stand up anymore? He's not there, but like There's hints of that.
He's doing gladiator-esque things, but Gladiator was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And again, they portray him as like a older, just guy that beats people up. I can see him coming in and breaking your arm. I can't then see him jumping off a 2-story building and running away.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Sure. Diving through a window, picking up a shotgun.
Yeah.
Correct. I don't see that happening.
Well, I'm going to give it a 1 for entertainment. And I am going to also give it a 1 for the law. Like you said, Marcia's daughter calls him out on all of his stuff. I spoke in talking about the private investigator stuff that, unless he has a police background, he would not have qualified to be a private investigator. The movie doesn't say he doesn't have that. I'm just saying there's no indication really that he was ever a police officer in the film, or any sort of government investigator. So I don't want to dock the movie for stuff that I am just inferring from its absence. Interestingly, the degree to which his daughter is Penny from Inspector Gadget and he is very much Inspector Gadget from Inspector Gadget was very striking to me.
Yeah, okay, that's a good
watch.
Yeah, that's a good one. He's crooked Inspector Gadget. That's pretty good.
So I am going to give it a 1 on the law. The timeline doesn't really work, like you said, with when catalytic. Oh, let me try that again. When catalytic converters were required to be put in cars. Yeah. I mean, all of that did happen. It just wasn't in 1977. I don't know why they said it then.
I'm wondering if I missed something there, because it just genuinely, it was rolled out in 1975, and they're the movie takes place in 1977. They're at the 1978 auto show.
It's very specifically then. I don't know.
Yeah.
But getting the year wrong is fairly minor when it comes to legal errors. And yes, Marsh does a bunch of stuff that would probably get his license revoked, but at the same time, private investigators seem to be given a fair degree of latitude by law enforcement. I don't know to what degree whatever licensing board holds them accountable for those kinds of things. Who knows? There's plenty of lawyers who do dumb or illegal shit and aren't called on it. So
one thing I wanted to know, to go back to the catalytic converters, is that the Clean Air Act was the thing that started it all, as Mike said, 1970, and they had 5 years to reduce the emissions. So that would make perfect sense if in 71, 72 they're fighting back to try not to have to go through with it. Mm-hmm. It makes zero sense that it was after that 5-year period when they knew those were coming in.
Or falsifying their emissions data or something like that to make it look like they were complying, but they really weren't.
I guess we just don't know what, and it would be funny if they just changed they could have just changed the year and everything would have been exactly the same.
Right.
There would have been slightly different. Although even the cars, there's little things that they got wrong. There's random goofs if you go on IMDb where
sure.
That car was not available until 1980 or something, or that things like that. And sometimes it's dumb because it's literally just it's a car in a certain paint or a certain trim level that no, that wasn't available until 2 years later.
Oh, that's okay.
That's in every movie.
That's only relevant in My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is and because I do know, I did read somewhere that they did some they did a lot of the filming not in LA and then put the LA skyline behind it. Yeah. Was there something in the early 70s where the skyline was different? I don't really know, because and if that's the case, that seems really dumb to change it to 77 for my purposes.
But
what do I know? What do I know?
Yeah.
But anyway.
So anyway, again, a 1 on both counts for me. So we're
unanimous.
3-0 on the law and 3-0 on entertainment. So.
Okay. Awesome.
All right.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2025, all rights reserved.